because of that, the Americans were quite unhappy with India at that time. So I think we probably at that time, given those circumstances, we took the right decision to join the Americans and to work with them for fighting against, in the UN. By the way, when I went there in early 80s, we used to have a resolution against Soviet intervention in Afghanistan in the General Assembly, and every year we used to score, more than 120 votes every time. So, and at that time the General Assembly had about 150 members. So, a large majority of the membership would be voting against the Soviet Union, and that was of great satisfaction to the Americans, and the Americans were very happy with Pakistan. So it was a kind of arrangement that worked both ways and was good for us.
So it was suitable for us during that time period.
Yeah. Now
what we did.
And now what I told you about the Indophiles and all that in Kremlin, the other reason is that the Indians have developed this partnership with America, and most diplomats and the establishment in Russia does not like that. They are quite unhappy that Indians have gone back on their friendship with Russia. So that also is a very important factor, and therefore now the realignments and the reshaping as is being taking place now, as we talked about, is the order of the day, and there you are.
All right, now Evim sir, the current mood of Modi, the mindset of Ajit Doval, and what is happening inside India, I mean, we all know. Maybe the Western media is not showing it the way they should have actually. But still, looking at the Kashmir issue and the Article 370 or 35A or otherwise, the problems the Muslims are facing, or the minorities primarily they are facing in India. Do you think, sir, the overall this aggressive posturing of India primarily is leading them nowhere, and rather a lot of criticism, a lot of articles I have read, I mean, those papers or publishers never used to write against India, but now you end up reading those articles which are very balanced, and they tell you exactly what's going on out there. And it seems that either Modi is confused, or maybe the kind of promises he had earlier made regarding the economic recovery and so on and so forth, I mean, that is overturned as well, because they're in negative growth at the moment, sir. And it is not 24%, by the way. Another Indian corrected, it is around 32% decline in the GDP.
Well, you see, Indians have been hoping to leverage their position, be it the Indian market, be it the Indian diaspora, be it the Indian relevance vis-a-vis China, and also the image that Modi had created in the eyes of his voters, that India has already become a regional power and aspiring to become a global power. And he, under the momentum of that impression that he had created, he had to pursue such like policies. And you see, when we talk of the role of the Indians vis-a-vis Kashmir at the international level, lately they attempted the UN to have the Kashmir resolution removed as something which is outdated, no longer relevant. Of course, it was befittingly answered by the Pakistani representative there, and it was not agreed to. And now that we in the SCO, when the Russians refused to accept the Indian objections, I think the Russians would have wholeheartedly relied on the UN Charter and the UN resolutions, Security Council resolutions, as to the disputed status of that territory, and that is how they could conveniently refuse to accept Indian demand. So, with this, we can say that the understanding or appreciation of the Indian position vis-a-vis occupied Kashmir, vis-a-vis their own minorities, is now dawning on the world, and now they are getting to see it more and more, and we see it being reflected in various reports of the UN institutions, and of course several articles written, several diplomats, parliamentarians, think tanks talking about it. But unfortunately, Mr. Modi has created that mindset, that momentum, which I think it is now very difficult for him to reverse or hold on to, and hence unfortunately he is continuing with it. But
how long can he continue with it, sir?
well, I think sooner or later he will have to stop.
At the end of the day, so the private sector of India, which I really believe is one of the best, there's no doubt, in terms of doing business, in terms of, you know, looking into opportunities and all. So they were of the opinion that India should have been a part of OBOR, because India would have benefited so much. I mean, currently they would end up having maybe some great jets, but they'll be obsolete maybe after 15, maybe 20 years. That's it. But this thing is permanent. This would have given them, I think they would have benefited more than Pakistan.
Certainly, but I think
But now they've taken a totally different, you know,
India
road.
having clearly drifted onto the American camp. I think one reason for Indians not to accept to be part of this is the American obligation, and but I think the kind of shrewd business people they would clearly see through it as to what is in their interest, and while the standoff is continuing between China and India on the Ladakh border, the Indians clearly sensed that the Americans were more than keen that there should be some hot exchange take place. We should engage the Chinese, and for once the Indians showed pragmatism and did not let it escalate or aggravate to an extent where a heated exchange of firepower takes place. So that didn't happen. So that means that there is
posture they're having against the Chinese. I mean, you know, deploying their Rafales for that matter in Mbala, and then, you know, increasing their troops on the border, and the kind of impression they're giving to the Indians. And look at the media. I mean, I don't know what their media is up to, but it seems that, you know, every day they would say, well, let's compare Su-30s with those jets, or J-20 versus this, and I mean, they are like,
I think it all emanates out of an impression, out of a dream, out of an illusion which has been created by Modi government in the eyes of its own people. That India has acquired a status of regional power and on the way to become a world power. And now the Indian people look at the government to stand up to the impression that they have created. And that is what actually forces not just the Indian government but also the media to follow this hegemonic approach even towards the Chinese, as far as their border region is concerned. And of course it is quite apparent that when you look at the record, the historical perspectives, that this was an area which was never demarcated, and the Chinese had always been asking the Indians to sit down and demarcate, but the Indians never went ahead with it. And they had a claim in their own mind which was not accepted by the Chinese, and they hoped that with the claim being so long in terms of time, it would be acceptable to the Chinese as well. But
they will not even leave a single inch.
Yes, and
this
that
is what
happen.
China is all about. So they will not take yours, but they will never leave theirs as well.
So that is the impression that the Indian government has been creating in the minds of its own people, and it is not the public pressure, it's not the media pressure which is forcing the Indian government to go ahead with this.
30 seconds comment, because time is almost over, sir. I was just told. Sir, whatever development is taking place in the South China Sea or in the Ladakh region, or I mean, looking at the exchange of these statements, do you fear, maybe at a small scale, there could be a war, sir?
First of all, I would like to submit that we try to critically examine India's foreign strategic policy, not what we think, what is the reality. I have to correct that the private business in India supported BJP rather than opposed it.
Sir, those
in
people...
2019.
Exactly.
So that is number one. Number two,
missiles, you talk about
India infrastructure build up on the LAC is very strong. But that is the Chinese are also worried. But when we look about these developments which you have referred, the problem with these strategic, you can say, activities is that initiating them is easy. But controlling their momentum or their driving them according to your own thing, that is sometimes certain what we call it systemic forces or those dynamism in those inside of these events that they get loose. That is the problem.
That is the threat also. And
Yeah,
not
that
only
is the
for
problem
those two
exactly.
countries, for the entire region. I'm just could just explode, sir.
Yeah, you see, one should take notice of all that is happening, and the latest is that the Russians have brought the foreign ministers of India and
Primarily to diffuse the situation.
and China to diffuse the situation, and they have decided to walk back virtually from the positions that they've taken, but they will maintain the LAC. So I think war, I don't see it yet. I don't see this.
Sir,
I agree with Ambassador Saab that there will be no war because both China and India do realize the catastrophic consequences of letting it go out of control, which is a very strong possibility of any such military conflict that erupts, that it is most likely that it will go out of control, and for which both the countries are not prepared. Much that the Americans would want it to happen.
is it is going to be a win-win situation for them? I mean, the two major countries following them in terms of economy, I mean, potential threat to the Americans.
And the encouraging part is that when you read the Indian media, you can clearly make out that the Indians are quite aware of this, of the American desire.
All right.
And so, which actually convinces
They're smart. They understand that, they can go up to this level, but they will not cross the line.
Yes.
But anyway, AVM Saab, thank you very much. Ambassador, it was a pleasure. Professor, thank you so much. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 with a different topic, inshallah. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz from us.
What are the symptoms of coronavirus? The most common symptoms of COVID-19 are fever, dry cough and shortness of breath. These symptoms may not be sudden, rather begin gradually. Precaution, not panic.
The Badshai Mosque, or the Royal Mosque in Lahore, commissioned by the 6th Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb in 1671 and completed in 1673, is the second largest mosque in Pakistan and South Asia and the 5th largest mosque in the world. Epitomizing the beauty, passion and grandeur of the Mughal era. It is Lahore's most famous landmark and a major tourist attraction. Capable of accommodating 5,000 worshippers in its main prayer hall and a further 95,000 in its courtyard, it remains the largest mosque in the world. From 1673 to 1986, a period of 313 years. When overtaken in size by the completion of the Faisal Mosque in Islamabad. Today, it remains the second largest mosque in Pakistan and South Asia and the 5th largest mosque in the world after Masjid al-Haram, Grand Mosque of Mecca, and Al-Masjid al-Nabi, Prophet's Mosque in Medina. The Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca and the Faisal Mosque in Islamabad. To appreciate its large size, the 4 minarets of the Badshai Mosque are 13.9 feet 4.2 meters tall than those of the Taj Mahal, and the main platform of the Taj Mahal can fit inside the 278,784 square feet courtyard of the Badshah Mosque, which is the largest mosque courtyard in the world. Architectural wonders of Pakistan.
These are the headlines of the hour. The government will soon introduce legislation to prevent rape cases and child abuse by serving exemplary punishments, improving policing and ensuring evidence protection, says Prime Minister Imran Khan speaking in the National Assembly. The joint sitting of the Parliament passes all three bills to meet the requirements of Financial Action Task Force to steer the country out of grey list. Three bills passed with a majority vote. Prime Minister Imran Khan congratulated the Parliament for passing this remarkable legislation. Prime Minister Imran Khan says, "We are working to revive the glory of Pakistan television. The government will increase PTV fee after considering the corporation's business plan." Pakistan Television and Pakistan Cricket Board signed 3-year agreement that gives PTV sole rights to broadcast all home bilateral commitments and domestic cricket till 2023. A new trade terminal opened at Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Chief Minister Balochistan inaugurated the Badini Gateway in Qilla Saifullah. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India has been losing its credibility at international fora due to its aggressive posturing. India steps up logistics for soldiers in Ladakh as New Delhi says border dispute with Beijing still remains unresolved. Those were the headlines. For details and live streaming, log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us at our Facebook page with the name PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. Goodbye for now.
Who am I? Am I the fire that burns at a Sufi's abode, where devotees come in reverence to seek warmth for frostbitten souls and rekindle the flame within? They come in throngs from all directions and in all hues to stop a while, but never to stay. Who am I? Am I the willow tree that gives shade to the jaded, but does not bear fruit? So when the sun mellows into a more merciful countenance, it's time to bid adieu. Who am I?
Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Viewers, once again we are going to talk about Pakistan's politics, especially you must have seen what has happened in the Parliament of Pakistan today. Pakistan has been trying to pass the FATF bills for quite some time. Since July we have been at it, but today finally, after repeated rejection from the opposition, especially in the Senate, we have seen that today there was a joint session that was called, and in that joint session what we have seen is 3 bills were passed. One is Money Laundering Second Amendment Act. Now it is an act. Of course, the President of Pakistan is going to assent it, and then it is going to become the part of the law. The second one is the Islamabad Capital Territory ICT Waqf Bill or Act, and the third one is Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act. All three are important because Pakistan has been facing charges internationally, especially from FATF, about money laundering and the possibility of sponsorship or support of terror. So these things are taken care of finally, and we are going to talk about these matters. Then, of course, is the politics of opposition. Even today, the opposition walked out when it didn't have its way. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari wanted to speak in response to these bills being presented, and he was not allowed because there was dearth of time. After that, Shahbaz Sharif and the leading lights of opposition led the opposition out of the parliament. They walked out. So what exactly is going on? Why do we have this kind of toxic relationship? When you listen to the government, the Prime Minister of Pakistan on the floor of the House today said that they are ready to compromise on anything, but they are not going to compromise on corruption or national interest, and the opposition keeps on demanding NRO. Opposition keeps on building this narrative that opposition perhaps is being persecuted by the government through various laws. And of course, there are aspersions about what they call hybrid democracy. We are going to talk about all these matters and more. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Ahmed Jawad Saab, who is Central Secretary Information of ruling party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Arif Chaudhry Saab sits next to him. He is a constitutionalist and senior legal expert. Thank you very much, Arif Chaudhry Saab, for being part of the program as well. Our third guest joins us on Skype. Mehtadar Saiba is a political analyst and a journalist. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us as well. Let me start with you, Ahmed Jawad Saab. Let me ask you about the need to call a joint session. Why is it that your party hasn't been able to work or develop a working relationship with the opposition?
First of all, the question why to call joint session, is it illegal?
No, but
I mean, if something is
but
within
is
the
it illegal?
Constitution,
Hang on. Is it illegal to ask this question?
No, I didn't say. But
right.
But that's why I'm asking that how to answer this question. I mean, this is a legal constitutional thing which always happen in Parliament many times.
Right. But
So-
you realize what happened today. There was a development before you called the joint session. The said bills were presented in the Senate, where they were rejected by a majority. After that, joint session was called. It took into cognizance all those bills, but the fact is that alters the numbers, because you don't have majority in Senate, and that would imply that you have to work with the opposition.
I think today's joint session, first of all, it was exactly according to the parliamentary procedures and traditions. There was nothing new. And secondly, the bills which were presented, I mean, government has every right again to present bills, and they were presented in the joint session. And then it is the majority vote who will decide. It is not the debates, or it is not the point of view, opinions. It is the majority vote that will decide the bills. So the consent of the Parliament was asked, and the bills were passed with the majority vote. So I think it was a very simple affair. Yes, opposition walked out after the bill, and the reason obviously that they knew that they do not have that numbers which can oppose or resist such bills. So I think the best chance for them was to walk out. They could see the writing on the wall, and so walking out of opposition from the Parliament is also not the first time.
Right. It is also according to the tradition of Parliament, right?
It is
my two questions, one question that I actually asked, and the second that I didn't
and I'm going to repeat that as well. The first question was, why haven't you actually built relationship with the opposition? The second question that I wanted to ask is regarding lack of debate on the subject matter, because you have been complaining that 18th Amendment was passed without much discussion or debate in the Parliament. Today, when you had joint session, you didn't have any debates.
Farrukh, first of all, FATF has been in discussion in Senate, in media for quite some time. So I think there was nothing which was not discussed on different forums. And
Parliamentary forums.
Senate is part of the Parliament.
Yeah.
So it was discussed, it was debated there. So today when it was presented in the joint session, obviously it is the pressing time of FATF session, which will be evaluating Pakistan's position on grey list or upgrading or downgrading. So it was a pressing time that we have to pass that bill, and there was unnecessary delay from the opposition, delaying tactics, I would say.
Okay.
So the government decided to be present in the joint session with the full force. Full force mean maximum numbers, and demonstrate the majority and get it passed as per the Parliament traditions.
And to dissolve the bicameral nature of the Parliament, because it has two houses, not one, but you actually brought them together. That solves the problem of numbers. But let me bring in Chaudhry Sahab, your take on these laws and the way they were passed. Do you think that they resolve the issue of money laundering and certain concerns that FATF has raised?
Thank you very much, Pitafi Sahab. It's the rhetoric about traditions.
Right.
And what are those traditions? Unfortunately, in our country, parliamentary democracy is not being practiced the way it has its traditions.
Okay.
The first tradition, which is a grand norm and accepted all over the world in parliamentary democracy, is when you are in the parliament, there are two sides. One is the government treasury benches, the other is the opposition.
Right.
And why the bills are presented before the House, that there should be discussion. And why the discussion takes place? In order to bring everything before the nation, before the members of the Parliament, and to take their input, because discussion, deliberations, they make things really wonderful, transparent and workable, because only just by depending upon the number game and passing through all such kind of legislations or legislative instrument doesn't help resolve the problems, because number one, it doesn't have that kind of sanctity and that kind of respect among the Committee of Nations, which, if it had been through a discussion in the Parliament and it had been passed with, if not unanimity, at least a sign of transparency that the opposition was taken on board, and they had discussion and the reason.
But you must have listened to Ahmed Jawad Sahab, sir. He just pointed out that there has been massive debate. Of course, the government has been trying to pass these bills since July, right? So there have been debates on the floor of the House. This time they had to do it because they have a timeline to enforce. Secondly, regarding the opposition also, although he didn't say it, but the implication and what Prime Minister of Pakistan today said essentially means that the opposition is demanding an NRO, and when they don't get it, they start playing politics on national interest.
But as far as the opposition is concerned, I don't think that they are playing their role, because if this opposition would have been true patriotic, working in true patriotic spirit, things would have been quite different. Because as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, I think he shouldn't always talk about NRO, because we have seen few things which were amounting to giving NRO, because we knew that it was claimed that Nawaz Sharif went out of this country only because he had an understanding, and that understanding was naturally, to my point of view, unconstitutional, ultra vires of the law, and that worked out, because it has never happened that anybody who is convict and he gets relief and he goes out of the country.
Right.
So as far as NRO is concerned, I think the rhetoric should stop now.
Right.
The real crux of the matter is that the parliament should play its role, and as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, he should have extended his hand towards the opposition, and the people would have watched all this, that,
Right.
hey, look.
Yeah, but with due respect, when the Prime Minister actually asked the opposition to cooperate and the opposition walks out, there is this impression that there is a gridlock. And because of that, opposition perhaps is also not supporting or helping. Secondly, you just spoke about NRO. With due respect, the opposition also keeps on only talking about NAB. But let me also bring in Meher Tatat Sahiba. You must be listening to the discussion, Meher Sahiba. Do you get this feeling that we are kind of trapped in a vicious cycle, that every day we are talking about NAB, NRO, FATF and the same old, and perhaps there is a deadlock or some kind of stalemate between the government and opposition?
I'm sorry, I have not been able to hear even a word of what you people have talked about, because I just joined the discussion. I'm sorry, okay, I think I should mute my sound on Skype. Can you hear me?
Of the parliament today, and we are looking at the Prime Minister of Pakistan's speech. The question was, we keep on hearing the same things over and over from the opposition. Opposition keeps on talking about NAB laws and how it feels that it is being persecuted, and the government keeps on talking about how the opposition is demanding NRO. Do you think that there is need for flexibility, not merely from the government side but opposition as well?
Absolutely. Both sides have to understand that there are certain issues on which they need to come together. They need to. There has to be an environment in which they can sit down and talk to one another in a healthy, constructive manner, when the purpose and the agenda is that of the well-being of the country. What I have noticed is that there is it looks like petulance of school children. The government is trying to do things that are good for the country, and apparently the opposition is not coming on board, and there's constant struggle about that. I do believe that since PTI is in government, it is on a higher. It has more power to do things in the sense it is the government that has to take certain decisions. It has to get certain bills approved. Of course, there would be opposition from the opposition. It's not just Pakistan; it happens all over the world. Even if there are bills that are not controversial, like this bill has made out to be. Because to begin with, this is FATF. This is a grey list that Pakistan should never be on. And if there are clauses, and if there are steps Pakistan can take to get itself, Pakistan government can take to get itself out of that grey list, of course it's wonderful for Pakistan, and that is what each and every Pakistani would want to see happen. But what has happened
That's a very good point, Meher Tatat Sahiba. Given that you have been following what has been happening in the past 2 months regarding FATF laws, today Pakistan finally managed to pass those laws. But do you think that opposition was also scoring points here? Do you think that the opposition was also trying to exploit this situation?
You see, Farrukh, there's so much mistrust, there's so much suspicion, there's so much paranoia, and that is simply because there is an absence of communication between the government and the opposition. As I said in your last show, when Imran Khan, the politician, has been talking about accountability of corrupt politician for as long as he has been in politics. And but now these people on the other side of not all of them, but people who are facing NAB cases, they do believe that it is a political witch hunt to eliminate political opposition from Pakistan. And so there are so many factors that have been kind of pushed together in a way that there seems to be no constructive way to have a healthy discussion right now, a healthy debate right now, and the only casualty is Pakistan. It's not about Imran Khan. It's not about Nawaz Sharif. It's not about Asif Zardari. The most important thing right now is to see that Pakistan gets out of the list. That is detrimental to its very stability right now. I believe there is a huge communication gap between the government and the opposition. Not everything.
Let us talk about that communication gap. That is also important. Let me go back to Ahmed Jawad Sahab. Ahmed Jawad Sahab, given that now Mian Nawaz Sharif roams free abroad, and yet your party keeps on saying that you are not going to offer any NRO to the opposition. One point that was made by Arif Shadi Sahab, that was a huge, unprecedented concession. Despite that, why is it that your party hasn't been able to develop working relationship with the opposition?
Farrukh, I think the problem with opposition is only one point agenda, and that is the accountability of the top leadership.
Right.
And whatever you do, whether it is something to do in the parliament or it is something to do on other forums or any national issue, whether it is corona or whether it is economy or whether it is about Kashmir, the opposition's entire point of view, it revolves around the accountability of the top leadership of the two parties.
Yes.
And that is very much understood, that when the leadership of a party is compromised, then you cannot expect that, from that party that they can have a national agenda. Their only agenda will revolve around the survival or the rescue package of the top leadership, because this is what flows from the top leadership. This is what becomes the narrative and the mandate and the agenda of the entire party. And they have to demonstrate their agenda, their campaign, their narrative in the parliament, on the media, on different forums, to press the government to prevent the accountability towards the top leadership of those parties. And that is why Imran Khan time and again he has to mention this thing. This is a reality. This is a ground reality, that today you grant the NRO unofficial or official to the top leadership of these two parties, everything will be okay in this country. There will be no chaos. I mean, the point exactly which you were asking, that why the government has not been able to develop a working relationship with the opposition, I can tell you the working relationship is possible tomorrow if we can give them those assurances that there will be no accountability and the cases will be removed, or they'll be allowed to
do whatever, whatever they want, you let them do that. Right. This reminds me of General Musharraf's time, right? When he came into power, at that time also the promise was that he is going to hold the corrupt accountable. For 3 years they kept on trying it, they created NAB as well, but eventually the government of the time realized that all this talk about accountability is hampering the economic growth. And then they shifted into a more flexible mode. Right now I understand that your party's platform is anti-corruption, but it is also good governance. Don't you think that if something that was visibly in the national interest, like these 3 FATF laws, if they can be held back for two months, at this moment this deadlock is actually hampering the government's agenda to serve people, and there should be some kind of flexibility. You can talk to the people, tell them that because there is a hung parliament, you have to do it. Ahmed Jawad sir.
Farrukh, I think you yourself just mentioned that it took 2 months for the ruling party to get this FATF, very vital for the national interest, so critical, yet it just lingered on, it got delayed, and the party took about 2 months. So you have mentioned this thing. So I mean, the government does try that there should be some kind of consensus on national issues.
Right.
If it is Kashmir, or it is about security, or it is about FATF. So government did attempt. That is why this 2 months has taken. But at the end of the day, now you have to see that what is the best option to get the FATF approved within the parliamentary traditions, procedures, and the law.
Right.
So the government took that step and just got it approved, and I think it is good for the country. If we are going to the FATF evaluation next month, I think it is already September half is over. The government has to do a lot of homework. And imagine that if on top of Corona, I mean whatever we have suffered in last 6 months, if after October onwards, if there is something wrong with the FATF evaluation, so imagine what are we going to face. Why to take that kind of a risk? So it has to be done in the national interest.
But what actually worries me is that it took 2 months, right? And it was clear to everybody it is in the national interest.
It could be earlier.
Are you going to hold joint sessions every time you have to pass a bill now?
I cannot say this thing because it all depends that what are the challenges and the challenges for the government. Because one thing, Farrukh, we must remember that when the people vote a party to come into the government, then there is an expectation from that government. And it is absolutely the jurisdiction, the right and the freedom of that political party who is in the government to implement its vision according to its own strategy.
Right, but we are parliamentary democracy and the numbers count.
And we are following that.
Right, but with due respect, numbers count and opposition also has a representation. Arif Chaudhry Sahab, coming back to this tradition of joint sessions. I remember there used to be joint sessions during previous governments also, but usually that they were there when an army chief had to brief or DJI had to brief on national security issues, right? Now, if we have to rely on joint sessions to keep on passing laws, do you think that nothing is violated if the government keeps on doing it in coming days and does it for other laws as well?
I would start from what, Ahmed Jawad Sahab said, that, the people who have elected the government and they brought the government into power, they expect a lot from the government. And that's my point. When the government is, expected to deliver, then naturally no delivery is possible without taking the nation into confidence and the representative of the nation into confidence. Had there been a move from government side that, okay, now this is our national agenda, these are national issues, this is Kashmir, this is FATF issue and all these things which are, faced with the nation. Okay, let's be together on this issue and I will shake hands with everyone. If there would have been such an attempt on the part of the government, and the opposition would not have responded positively, naturally everybody, including myself and yourself and, all those who are, watching this situation, which is the turmoil which is going on in the country for last 2 years and more than 2 years even prior to the, government was installed in this, the PTI government. So they would have naturally accused the opposition that, hey, look, as far as the government
we are reaching out and
they are trying to reach out to the opposition, but the opposition is not cooperating.
Yeah, but honestly, do you think that these optics are going to change something that might be there, the deep cynicism that might be prevailing within the opposition ranks? Because one aspect is what they are facing right now, what they claim they are facing right now. The second thing is, of course, they have a mutual beef against the government regarding its own sit-ins in Islamabad, the dharnas, right? So they keep on scoring point. Do you think that optics are going to resolve this situation?
But Abhita, one thing which the government has to make it very clear, whether they are in charge of this accountability process,
Right.
or they don't hold any position whatsoever, as far as the accountability is concerned. Because as far as their own admission is or their stance is concerned, they say, look, this accountability process is independent. The chairman is appointed by the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister formally, and we have nothing to do with that.
Okay.
On the other hand, they are taking the charge of this entire process. Where do they fall?
Okay.
Can they issue instructions to the NAB, and whether they can have a deal which is, ultra constitutional and beyond law? When they refer to this NRO, they actually want to arrogate those, are claiming to arrogate those powers which are not vested in them, which were vested in a person who was holding power beyond constitutional limits. And he could do this kind of dealing. And they are bound by the constitution and by the law and the independent judiciary which is now in place. And there is no way that they can give any access to or any way out to somebody which is beyond law. And even this concession which was granted, they have not been able to take the ownership as of today. Only by way of just face saving, they said, a Prime Minister said, I felt compassionate. And and under the compassion, I gave them this kind of relief. So please take one stance, so that we should all be able to understand. One thing, you are in charge of accountability, and the opposition wants that you should have a deal with them, and otherwise they will not cooperate.
Right. With due respect, when it comes to the show of compassion, we know what happened with that compassion as well. The government actually showed compassion, and there were reports that Mian Nawaz Sharif might actually be suffering from something very badly, that he can't move, and he has suffered multiple strokes. The next moment when he gets the relief, he's walking towards the aeroplane, and everybody is asking what exactly happened here, right? So there is some kind of confusion when it comes to the claims of opposition and what is going on, and we have to actually look at that as well. Let me bring in Meher Patel Sahaba once again. Ma'am, do you realize that when we talk about the possibility of the opposition and government working together, many voters of PTI actually perceive it as a possible compromise on the stance of anti-corruption, that you have to actually give concession to the opposition parties, and then the government will be allowed to function. Don't you think that this is also a possibility, that if we make that argument, we might also be colored in that way, that we are pro-corruption?
Farrukh, what the gentleman was saying, I think we talked about this on the earlier show as well, that Prime Minister Imran Khan needs to detach himself from the process of accountability completely. He should not be giving any kind of statements vis-a-vis the NAB cases that the opposition is facing. Whenever he talks about NRO, he's obviously talking about the cases that they are facing. That the courts are free, the government keeps insisting on that. And then every second statement that comes from the Prime Minister or any of his top tier cabinet members, they repeat the same narrative, that the government is not going to compromise, government is not going to give an NRA. What has happened regarding Mian Nawaz Sharif's travel, travel to London for a few months. Prime Minister Imran Khan, in principle, shouldn't have agreed to do that. But since he did, and then he realized that it was a compromise on everything he had been fighting for in the last 22 years. So now when Nawaz Sharif is, the thing is, even if he looks perfectly healthy, there is no way to say that he's God forbid not unwell. Because he may be suffering from whatever they say he's suffering from. Let's not get into somebody's health issue. That is for the doctors to decide. What I would want to see this government do is detach itself from this accountability thing completely. Even today, when a very important bill was passed, you have to
let me take your answer and build a hypothetical question. Let us suppose that the government of Pakistan, especially Prime Minister Imran Khan, stops talking about accountability. But remember, the opposition's entire case or narrative is built on accountability. And even if Prime Minister doesn't talk, there is going to be accountability process, and they will have to go to the courts, right? Do you think that in that scenario, situation will soften and the opposition suddenly will start cooperating? Because they will be feeling that they are persecuted, right?
You see, Farrukh, I did not get a chance to watch the Prime Minister's speech, but I just saw a couple of clips before coming on your show, and in one of the clips he was saying that look at his Haqdar and his background, and look at Nawaz Sharif and what his father was. And I think as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he should not be like other people. He should not be like other leaders. He should not be like politicians who get personal with one another. There is no need to bring anywhere. I mean, there are people who are self-made and they are billionaires today. But you cannot say that just because somebody's father did not have money, you cannot be wealthy in 2021. What I'm trying to say is that if it was not Imran Khan and his government that started most of these cases against these leaders, but if you keep talking about one thing and no matter what the topic is, no matter what the occasion is, no matter what the audience is, if the crux of your narrative, of whatever you're saying is going to be about the corrupt opposition. They're not all corrupt. No, PTI is not all saints, and the opposition is not. They are not all evil, corrupt people who made billions of dollars each in Pakistan. Let's be very clear about that. So when the Prime Minister is talking about preventing Pakistan from COVID-19, a very, very remarkable achievement that has been praised by Bill Gates, by WHO, by